Thank you all for attending our presentation at this year's state meeting of the NAFSA. My name is Jamie Horn, and I'm the Director of Human Resources at PMD Corporation.
And I'm Kelsey Strong, the Training Specialist at Toyota Susho America. We're both recent graduates of the Industrial Organizational Psychology Master's Program at Eastern Kentucky University.
And today we're excited to tell you all about our workshop, Building Leadership and Assertiveness, that was presented at Global's retreat in August of 2014.
So an overview of what we're going to talk to you about today is first we'll begin with the development of our workshop, and then we'll get into the specific content of the workshop. Next, we'll talk about the activities we included, then we'll talk about facilitating the workshop, and then lastly we'll wrap up with what we gained from this experience.
As we were discussing the scope of this project, we realized that we would be working with women that were very eager to learn and especially explore their capacities as leaders themselves. However, it was very important to recognize both cultural and gender differences that would come into play with this project. Kelsey and I have been working together on developing trainings for about 2 years now, and we were particularly excited about this project as we both have a passion for empowering women and are both interested in leadership.
So at the beginning of the project, leadership was proposed as the topic, but from our own training, we quickly recognized how broad of a topic leadership is, and also through our own experiences, we recognized that assertiveness is a critical component of being an effective leader. And also thinking about the needs of our participants, who are women, women tend to be less assertive in comparison to men. So we chose to include assertiveness in our training because we felt it was an important skill for the women of Global to gain so that they can become more effective leaders. After we identified the main topics of our training, what we decided to do was develop a participant booklet, which you can see right here, which would help our participants, the women of Global, follow along with our training and stay engaged. And also be able to write down notes and follow along with activities.
So not only was this engaging during the training, but it's a useful resource after the training that they can refer back to. And we also thought that it would be great to motivate them to continue learning on these topics. For the leadership section of our workshop, we broke it down into 3 subcomponents: what makes a leader, leadership styles, and leadership efficacy. In the section on what makes a leader, we discussed in an interactive manner what the individuals in the training felt made a leader. And here we really wanted to emphasize that anyone is capable of being a leader. Next, we emphasized leadership styles. These included laissez-faire, transactional, and transformational leadership. Here we wanted to recognize that styles are flexible and that you're not just committed to one style, that you can be flexible and adapt in situations, and that it's very context specific which style you may or may not want to use. And lastly, we included leadership efficacy as an important component, as participants in our audience were young women who haven't had as many opportunities to serve in leadership roles. So we thought it was very important to instill confidence in these women and have them feel that they're capable of being a leader.
For the assertiveness segment of our training, we broke this topic into 5 areas. First, we defined assertiveness as a communication technique in order to express one's feelings and meet one's needs while respecting the needs of others. Next, we talked about the difference between passiveness, assertiveness, and aggression, where passiveness is violating one's own rights in order to meet another's rights. Assertiveness is respecting both one's rights and another's rights. And lastly, aggression is violating another's rights in order to meet one's own needs and put oneself at priority. Next, we talk about why it's important to be assertive and how not being assertive can affect you emotionally and physically. And lastly, we talked about 3 techniques for building assertiveness, which were basic assertiveness, empathetic assertiveness, and lastly, consequence assertiveness. The first leadership activity was the Leadership Styles Questionnaire from Sage Publishing. When learning about leadership, it's natural to wonder, what kind of a leader am I? Or what is my leadership style? Through this activity, we wanted to help the women of Global identify their leadership style so they could not only stay more engaged in the content, but also so that they could identify their strengths and weaknesses as a leader so that they could make improvements but also continue with their strengths or alter their leadership style depending on the situation. For the second leadership activity, we asked the women of Global to identify leadership styles. For this activity, we presented the women with a scenario and asked them to identify the leadership style of the individual in the scenario. So, our goal through this activity was to make the scenario both realistic and relatable to our audience, who are women in college. So the main character of our scenario was Beth, the CEO of the Student Activities Council at Eastern Kentucky University. For the activity, the women would read a paragraph of the scenario and then identify the style after it. Lastly, we left space for the women to write questions, concerns, or difficulties they experience while identifying the leadership styles, and we also asked them to identify what made it easier for them to identify the leadership styles and the successes they experienced. The third leadership activity was creating a leader efficacy development plan in order to help the women of Global continue to develop themselves as leaders, but also work on developing their confidence and efficacy as leaders. For this activity, we asked the women to develop 2 SMART goals. And a SMART goal is a goal that is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. We asked them to choose goals that they could accomplish within the next 6 months or by the end of the semester. Next, we asked them to identify 2 steps for each goal that could help them achieve their goal. And lastly, we asked the women to sign and date this plan in order to increase their commitment with following through on the plan. For our assertiveness activity, we practiced the assertive behavior of saying no. During the developmental stages of this project, we learned that the women of Global specifically struggled with the assertive behavior of saying no, and that they would often agree to perform tasks that they necessarily didn't have the time to or didn't desire to because they struggled with being able to be assertive enough to say no. Therefore, we designed this activity to specifically address those difficulties. First, for this activity, we asked the women of Global to identify a time that they have wanted to say no and to share that with the group. Next, we did a group role play where we asked for one volunteer to perform the refuser role, or the person who says no, and one volunteer to perform the requester role, which was the person who was asking a favor of the other person. Next, we gave them a situation, and then we asked everyone as a group to identify the outcomes. So was the refuser able to say no? What technique did the refuser use? And what could the refuser have done differently in order to make the outcome better? Then we asked the participants to break up into pairs and do the activity again, because we really wanted each individual to have an opportunity to play both the refuser and the requester. Lastly, we debriefed on the activity, where we asked the women to reflect on their experience as the refuser and as the requester, what difficulties they individually experienced, what styles work best for them, what they do differently in the future, and then we also asked each woman to identify a time in the near future where she is going to say no.
Our training was broken down into 2 separate 1.5-hour segments. Our 2 main goals in terms of facilitation was to have a comfortable and safe environment, and second, to have an interactive based training. We thought that it was important to have a comfortable environment as individuals would be sharing and trying to learn from one another about a topic that they may be unfamiliar with. And then second, we wanted to have an interactive training so that people would discuss and share examples from their own experiences and be able to facilitate a support system within this group. We also thought it would be important to come prepared with examples that would coincide with the training activities so that we could facilitate participation. This was very important, especially at the beginning of the training as participation was low, and then that picked up the discussion and it became more interactive towards the middle. Throughout activities and discussion, a common topic that arose several times in conversation was that balance between assertiveness and aggression. These women expressed that it was a constant struggle to want to seize opportunities, speak up, and be assertive, and they knew that was an important component of leadership, but they also didn't want to be taken as rude, disrespectful, or an aggressive woman. So through these activities, we were able to clear up that confusion and really emphasize the need and the right way to be assertive so that you can seize opportunities and be involved and facilitate effective leadership through your assertiveness skills. Additionally, resources and practice were emphasized throughout the training. So we took time to talk about resources that these women felt were available to them in their everyday lives and leaders that they could look to for experience and knowledge going forward after this training. And additionally, as Kelsey mentioned, we developed the SMART goals to incorporate the topic of leadership efficacy. And I'd love to share a couple examples that the women came up with as their developmental plans. So these SMART goals were so creative, and I really enjoyed discussing these with the ladies. First, one aspiring club leader said that she wanted to run for an office soon, and she was going to start by networking with those within her group and start planning her goals for that group that she could share with others so they would know what her purpose as a leader would be. Another SMART goal that was developed was a young woman who aspired to be a leader in her future career field. So her steps to get her to that position was to join the 2 relevant clubs that were on campus that related to her field of study. Throughout the training, we really emphasized the importance of creating obtainable SMART goals so they could stand as benchmarks to help you exercise and expand your skills. Not only was this an educational experience for the women of Global, but it was also beneficial to us as graduate students and professionals. This was truly a mutually beneficial partnership. We were able to bring together 2 groups from Eastern Kentucky University's campus for a common purpose of empowering women and emphasizing leadership.
Another benefit we gained from working with the women of Global was being able to put everything that we've been learning into practice and to gain a real world experience. So, from the beginning stages of developing this training to creating the activities to facilitating it with the women, and then lastly to reflect on the experience.
Throughout our graduate studies, it was emphasized that practice should be culturally and context specific. And this project, we got to do just that. From the beginning stages of meeting with our client, we determined the cultural background of our trainees. And then during the developmental process, we used those specific needs to cater the training to our client.
Specifically for me, it was beneficial because I'm currently working at Toyota Tsusho America, which is a Japanese trading company, and so having this experience with the Women of Global taught me to really consider the cultural needs of others and consider the cultural backgrounds of others, and it's really benefited me by getting me in that mindset for my professional career. Through the training that we've discussed today, we help the women develop a realistic view of leadership, develop and increase their assertiveness and confidence as a leader, and also increase their knowledge of how to utilize leadership resources.
In closing, we'd like to thank you all for taking the time and having the interest to learn more about our topics. We both personally are very passionate about leadership and empowering women, so we appreciate you all doing the same.
If you have any further comments or questions, please use the following contact information to get a hold of us. Thanks for coming to our presentation and have a good day.